You're listening to Arsenal Pass, a flesh and blood podcast for players by players. And all about strategy, leveling up, and the latest news in the world of Wraith. Welcome to Arsenal Pass.
Hello everybody, welcome back to episode 40 of Arsenal Pass. I'm Brendan Patrick, joined always by calling champion Hayden Dale. Hayden, how are you doing?
Yeah, Brendan, I'm good. We're here. This is our first episode doing video. We talked about it for a while. We wanted to do it for a while. We just couldn't work logistically with you in Colorado on that bush internet, and I've been away as well. So here we are in the new year. This is our second episode of January, right? Happy New Year.
Yes, it is. But you didn't tell me how you were doing. Did you say you were good? Because
I'm
doing
good.
Great, and it's.
What's that?
We just opened a pack of Everfest, and this is being recorded on the 12th. So this is before any spoilers, and man, was that fun. That was really cool.
What a tease.
I'm super excited. What a tease. I feel like we got, we got a really good, I mean, some people, usually we just get a card, a spoiler here, a spoiler there. We got a full pack. It was sick. Oh man.
Yeah.
Can't wait for everybody else to see. And the packaging looks and feels and functions fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, anyway,
that one you can definitely talk about. Just can't talk about the contents yet. But we've been asked to we make a clip. We'll put a clip together of it anyway, and depending on what's shown beforehand, we'll put on time in the round as well. As soon as we can show it, as we're allowed to.
Yeah, for sure. Also, I'm kidding. I was gonna say, if you're a content creator, hit me up. Show me your pack. But the past 48 hours have been a big shakeup for Flesh and Blood. So this week we're hitting the battle stations and discussing the latest and a restricted update. The Errata to Briar and the impact that these announcements will have on the immediate and long term of the game. We have a few updates to bring on Arsenal Pass and some announcements of our own channel. But first off, Hayden, talk to me about your week in Flesh and Blood.
Yeah, my week in Flesh and Blood. Look, it's been nose to the grindstone, really. Nationals is next weekend. So for me, it's Thursday. We're eight and a bit days away now from Nationals. And yeah, feeling pretty good. Just trying to get in as much testing as possible for Classic Constructed. Drafts here and there where I can as well. Did 2 drafts over the weekend. And then, just played a lot of Classic Constructed. Mostly testing with Dan at this point because he also has his Nationals. And then contributions from the team were available. Just trying to, pretty solidified on the list now, I think. The list is pretty locked in. There's probably a few cards that are debatable that we're trying to work through with some matchup plans. But yeah, it's been a crazy week, and next week, this kind of next 7 days, I'm sure will be a lot of testing as well, trying to make as much time as possible to just I guess, shore up a few things ready for Nationals. I really want to do well at Nationals, so yeah.
Well, that's convenient because you're going to win.
Try.
So on my end, I've been playing less Flesh and Blood because my schedule has actually sort of changed. It's been a bit hard. It's very hard, actually, extremely hard for me to make the morning sessions now. But I'm going to be curating some afternoon and evening sessions. And I think that our team or group, whatever you want to call it, is developed to the point where we can work asynchronously. We all kind of know the process. We kind of moved to a version of that recently where Hayden and Dan would be on quite a bit earlier than us. They would meet us kind of right before the Americans hopped on. And, sometimes we get a little chat, but ultimately we knew how to sort of manage what we needed to get done from an asynchronous schedule and then, develop information that would be useful to the entire group. So moving forward, that I think we'll be able to schedule some afternoon sessions and get me back onto my daily testing.
Just play some fab.
Yeah, other than that, get some fab. But Hayden, this week's news is, some could say it's breaking news.
Yeah, I mean, top of the list, and we're going to be discussing it in this episode, but the update to the ban restricted list and an errata, which has come earlier than scheduled. So the original ban update was scheduled for, I think, start of Feb, so Everfest timing, has been brought forward, but it's going to be excluding New Zealand and Australian nationals. So the changes, we have Underrun and Ball Lightning are banned in Classic Constructed, Dustblade is banned in Blitz, and there's been an errata, a functional errata to Briar, now limit to once per turn with the Earth embodiment. So the first time you would deal damage, an attack action you control would deal damage, then you create an embodiment of Earth. No subsequent embodiments of Earth. So some pretty big changes there. We're going to dive into that further details we get into the pod, but that's happened in the last 24 hours since we're kind of recording. Happened, not long ago now, and it's a big shakeup, right? It's going to be a big change.
Yes, but in classic fashion, we would jump the gun and talk about it during the news, but we're going to leave it for the actual pod this time.
We're restrained of you.
Yeah, I know. Usually I'm the one who comes in and is like, well, here's what I think. But yeah, we do have an entire podcast devoted to that topic alone.
So, spoilers. Brendan said we just opened a pack of Everfest, which is awesome. So cool to be able to do, and excited to share that with everyone. But we're already starting to see some spoilers. So we've, of course, had the Life of the Party and Valda, so our first new hero as well. And now, one for Brendan. What an Ice Wizard. How are we saying this? How are we pronouncing this hero?
Oh man, we got to do this one again.
Slander?
I think it's Slander.
Yeah.
Yeah, Slander. What did you think it was? You were like,
I just thought it was Islander. I don't know.
Islander, yeah. It's just a posh way of writing Islander. No, it looks sweet.
So Ice Wizard, 18 health, and hero ability is you can play blue stripe cards from your arsenal during your opponent's turn as though they were instants.
Obviously, a very different take on the wizard class from its counterpart, Kano. Like, if you go read their article, they mention some cards that could be featured in this deck, and it all looks very exciting to me. I remember when I first saw this spoiler, I was like, I wonder if this just gets dunked on by Dustblade, but turns out it's not going to matter. Looks really cool. I'm excited. I mean, this is going to be a totally different take, right? It's going to be very different. I think the immediate place the mind goes to is thinking about some sort of control deck, but I could easily see there being some kind of way where this ends up being like a normal wizard deck and just exploits that arsenal clause, right? I think that during spoiler season, we all kind of see a card and what its face up or top level design is really trying to do, and we immediately go there. So we're like control deck, and then sometimes it turns out you can just throw a bunch of the stuff that you usually throw in it or generics, and that's really where it's most powerful. So a lot to explore with this class, and I'm very excited. There's a funny thing going on with her where it's sort of a blue card matters, right? Which is cool, right? Because, in Kano, the blues are pretty much resource cards. I really would have, honestly, I know it's not on theme, but I kind of wish it was a yellow strip matters, because yellow cards in Wizard they're actually paperweights. Like, those cards are not playing.
Well, some, but they're supers and majestics, aren't they?
Yes, they're all supers. Like, what cycle card is like actively played? There really isn't one. It's crazy.
Yeah, but maybe there should be. Maybe that's just sort of deck building hasn't evolved to that point. We haven't had the right format to play 9 Aether Flare deck. Who knows? We'll see. But yeah, I mean, it's cool. It's I think it's really interesting when you take a step back and look at it. The fact that when Tales of Aria came out, we had all these blue ice cards. Channel Lake Frigid, Blizzard. It was like, oh, these are interesting. Like, cool that they're blue pitch, makes sense with the old time. And now you've got new Ice Wizard hero as well that cares about blue pitch, and you have these ice cards that are already here available to slot right in immediately.
Yeah, I mean, we talk about this a lot with Flesh and Blood being sort of a role-playing-esque game where you can kind of pick your hero or your class that you identify with, and a majority of the player base, I believe, does do that, right? Like, that is a big pull of the game. We sort of maybe don't acknowledge it enough as from our point of view or our take, but I think if there was one class that I share that sentiment with, it definitely is Wizards. So I'm very excited for this, and I did see Card Market post on Twitter that there wouldn't be an adult version, and I have to say it was absolutely heartbreaking.
Yeah, Brennan's still in mourning. So, but yeah,
awesome.
And we also have a card that's been designed by the Village People. We have Macho Grande, which is a Guardian 7-cost attack action at red attacks for 10, and it has Dominate. So there's a cycle of this. What's your thoughts on this card?
I'm not too sure, right? Like, it's interesting.
Blue seems good.
Yeah, I mean, the blue, it definitely seems very good in that sense. I know when you said Macho Grande, I thought you were talking about the local taco place or something. I was like, I was so confused for a second. You're like, Macho Grande. I was like, what? But obviously it's the spoiler. It looks really cool, and I'm really excited that, we're getting pieces like this. What is your take, being kind of the resident expert in that area?
Am I? Well, we're in trouble.
Most certainly.
No, I think it's cool to see Dominate come in. So Dominate we've seen as a mechanic for Guardians from Bravo, right? Like that's where it's come through. Now we have, Velda and Oldtime, two more Guardians, one young and adult, that don't have the access to Dominate like we have. So they can play cards like, Emerging Dominance, but that's kind of some of the only ways they can really get Dominate. So to have cards that have Dominate printed on them in Guardian is quite a cool thing where it's like, okay, so all of these heroes could play this card. How does it interact with each of them? Well, Bravo has access to give, something like Disable Dominate, which has one less attack than these, but has a really big upside, versus in the other two heroes where they don't have access to that. So I think we're going to see potentially all of the colors played across different heroes in different ways, which the card looks innocuous on the surface, like, okay, there's this big attack with Dominate, but actually the design space of it's quite interesting. So yeah, I think blue probably slots into some of these decks immediately, and then we'll see if red maybe gets played as well, or I want to go back and revisit these aura decks, and maybe this is how that plays with those decks. We'll see.
Absolutely. The undiscovered archetype. So I want to mention something that we're doing on Friday that I am I'm very, very excited about it. I was going to say more excited than I've ever been, but I am extremely excited. So we are hosting a Twitter Spaces on Friday at 6 p.m. Central U.S. time. And Zach Bunn will be joining us, but I don't know if you've used Twitter Spaces before. The way it works is, let's say you're on your phone, you're on Twitter. If you're at the top, you'll see it. If you're following Arsenal Pass, myself, Hayden, or Zach, you'll see it. It'll pop up. You just click it. You join the room. It's like an app called Clubhouse. It's also like that. There's probably some other Hangout apps. But basically, you can listen in, but you can also request to come on stage, and you can raise your hand and do all this kind of stuff, and we can have an interactive conversation with the community. And I'm super excited. So we're going to be talking about everything, right? Like we're going to be talking about spoilers, bans, Blitz, or anything anybody wants to bring up. The floor is yours. I'm really excited, and I thank you so much to Zach from Team Covenant for joining us, one of my favorite people in the world. So it's surely to be good. Starting at 6 p.m. Central Time, probably going for an hour, but knowing Mr. Zach Bunn, we will probably go later.
Yeah, I'm trying to convert that for anyone else around the world who wants to jump in and join. So that's Saturday, my time. I think is it 6 p.m. for you right now?
It is 6:11 p.m.
Yeah. So it's 11 a.m. Australian time, Australian Eastern time. That's 1 p.m. in New Zealand. This is something that Brennan brought up to me. I know nothing about, but it sounds kind of town hall style, and it sounds cool, and I'm real into it, and I'm excited to just have this forum to discuss with someone that we really like in the form of Zach, but also with people from our community as well who probably have some thoughts about what's to come with Everfest spoiler season. So yeah, looking forward to it. With that said, just a couple other notes in the news. It looks like we're going to get an OP announcement possibly next week. So I don't know if anyone saw this, but last week, Fab TCG, or actually, sorry, the start of the week, with everyone back in the office, I guess they've published sort of Welcome to 2022, sort of it's like a gateway article, I guess, with a lot of pieces around the OP events coming up, Welcome to Wraith, how to find events, things like that. And in James White's article prior to Christmas, he'd say that mid-January, we're likely to find out more about the OP announcement. And this feels like they've set up this article and there's a few things in place now. And it looks like we're going to get it very soon. We're going to understand what beyond the ProQuest season, which is all we kind of know about right now. What are we getting? Are we getting another skirmish season? When are we getting the first Pro Tours? What callings are happening for Q1 and Q2? So yeah, I'm really excited to see what we get. And it looks like, in the next week or so, we're going to have some announcements.
Dude, I can barely contain myself. I feel like for the last month, it's just been, it's
been
waiting, right? And then it's like, boom, spoilers, OP announcement, bannings. I just, it's too much, right? Like in a good way. It's also good. Cool. I mean, I feel like we're kind of back in the glory days.
Hey, imagine if you were also testing for nationals at the same time. It's been a pretty busy time. Been no downtime.
I would say that would make it minorly stressful and right now for me, I'm just in bliss.
I'll say.
But you're going to win nationals, and I can't. That's going to be an amazing feeling.
This is going to date well.
Australian national champion, currently on the call. Oh man, I can't wait to hear your thoughts on the banning from such an accredited person in the competitive
I'm going to do my
community.
best. I definitely have the goal of winning nationals, but it's going to be there's a lot of good players, and this format is interesting. I think there's a lot of openness to this format as well, so it's definitely going to be a tough event. But I feel like putting the prep work, so ready for it. Anyway, moving on to some other things that are happening. So Farewell, Welcome to Wraith. These events are happening in a couple of weeks' time. Last week of January. These are local store events. We've talked about it a little bit, but if you haven't heard about them, you can check them out on fabtcg.com. There's an event located there, but honestly, just reach out to your local stores. I know for me, some of our local stores just haven't even put up their events. They just, started January. It's slow to get back into things. So definitely you can find those on Event Finder and then contact your store. But yeah, you can get yourself a cold foil Welcome to Wraith hero, young hero, which is awesome. And you get to draft some Welcome to Wraith before it sort of sunsets out. And on that note as well, we do have some videos up on the channel for Welcome to Wraith Limited. If you're interested, maybe you haven't played it before, it's going to be the first time. We've got a few gameplay videos up. We do also have a Welcome to Wraith 101 draft guide video going up by the time the pod drops. I think it's either already up or it's about to go up within 12 hours time. So that's awesome. And then
It's
up
made
on
by a Welcome to Wraith Calling Limited champion as well. So who better to get your advice from?
Yeah, so Isaac Olsen did do those videos for us. No. So yeah, those videos are available. There's also one for each hero as well, which I intended to be sort of like 5 or 6 minute videos. Have ended up being a little bit longer, but do talk about all the draft archetypes for each of those heroes. I got a bit passionate about them, but there's you can watch one of those videos and you can go in and draft Guardian and draft OTK Guardian. You can go and draft, Big Crush, Go Tall Guardian. You can draft Control Guardian with what we've kind of put together. So,
did you include that the archetype Yellow Bella?
No, I think I left that one out. Yeah, Yellow Bella was in there. The one draft archetype that Brennan does love.
Yeah, it's just the only one I know.
Yeah. Awesome. So I guess this is kind of transitioning out of the news into some announcements for ourselves, for the channel. This is kind of where we usually do the Command and Cookout section. But first of all, I want to give a bit of an update on the channel and some things content-wise that we're working on, and just to give an update to our amazing listeners, our viewers, our community, really. Got a few things to say, Brennan. So just want to give a bit of background to kind of the changes we're making to the channel, and while we're doing things. So I guess when we started the pod, right, Brendan, it was about the pod. It was literally the pod. That's why we started Arsenal Pass. It was okay. We feel that there's a space to share content, share our ideas, our thoughts on the game, help people understand this game, get better at it, especially that kind of entry level of the competitive space where people are starting to get into callings, and Road to National season was like on the horizon when we first started the pod. Came not long after. We knew there was going to be more callings. And so that's kind of where we really started with the pod. And then we felt, there was opportunity for us to do things like the gameplay videos to showcase matchups and interesting decks that maybe don't get the spotlight out there, how to play those. And the big thing we wanted to do is we wanted to talk through our lines, right? That's kind of where we started. Like, let's talk through lines and gameplay, and let's go through the games and do it. And then that kind of evolved into deck guides about the decks we played. Obviously, that started with like the Road to Nationals winning chain list, the skirmish wizard list, the Katsu list, a few different deck techs and guides that we've done. And then time in the round as well, which has been an awesome sort of ability for us to originally just discuss the game and the history of the game, but now to interact and bring on community members, players that are, in the sort of, I guess, quote unquote professional players as we head into the Pro Tour season, community members, and just people that we want to talk to and think are interesting and have stuff to say about this game that we love. And all through this, we've wanted to keep our content as high quality as possible. Like, production value has been something we've always talked about. We don't want to do stuff for the sake of doing it. We don't want to do it sort of half-assed. We want to make sure that it's done well. So a lot of time and effort goes into that. And it is a lot of time and effort, right, Brendan? Like, it has taken, I think we've loved it, but Arsenal Pass takes up a lot of our time.
Yeah, and I think that we have continuously kind of committed to doing more and more, right, as we've found either new mediums or just new topics we like to cover. Yep. That, you can see that through time of the round. And then it was also through deck text, through certain types of videos, at least a gameplay every week, but also covering Blitz, limited, constructed, and also covering decks that maybe we had to practice with a lot to kind of feel comfortable playing or bringing to the channel, especially in regards to the deck techs, right? Because initially, for example, with the Kato deck or with the Chain deck, like those were decks that we had personally put a
A lot
lot
of
of
time.
effort, a lot of time, effort, and passion into, and it's very natural and easy to kind of present that to people and give it to them, and I genuinely think that that's kind of the best version that's out there at this point. While the ones that came after that, I do think were very good decks and we worked very hard at them. There's just a difference, right? There's a difference between showing you kind of the deck that I've been working on and pushing to be competitive with for months and months and months, and I know inside and out, versus bring everybody a new deck for a hero that I don't play so much, that I've also kind of learned within the last month. Well, I do think that content was very valuable to people and a lot of people enjoyed it. For me, to be honest, it wasn't as fun to make as something like, the Chain or specifically like the Kano deck. Like that's really where my passion was.
Yeah, and I think for me, I play more heroes than Brendan does. I think I tinker around with a lot more things. So for me, it feels a bit more natural. But at the same time, one of the things we never really wanted to do, like we're players first, right? I think that's been our point of differentiation with when we started this pod, is that we've always said, and I think we've been pretty open and honest about it, is that we are players making, sharing our experiences and sharing our insight for other players. We don't really see ourselves as content creators first and foremost. I don't think that's never what we've kind of seen. So, and I think the development of what we've done with the channel, we have, every week we're delivering a gameplay video. Every week we have time around. We have our deck guides once a month, minimum, often twice a month, plus other things that come up. Of course, the pod every week. That rigidity, I think, is probably, we haven't been able to keep to the sort of things that we want to as much as possible. So, I mean, long and short of it, we're just going to be making some changes, to be honest, that fit more with who we are as Arsenal Pass, who me and Brendan are as players, and to be honest, to reduce our stress levels in our lives. Both
sure.
Me and Brendan are very, very busy with our careers, and we do try and have personal lives as well. We try, and having this, I guess, schedule or rigidity of content when we might be traveling or for fab or things are going on is really difficult, especially if we feel pressured to make content that we're not as passionate about, or share deck guides that maybe we don't feel like Brendan talked about. It's not our Kano deck that he spent 3 months playing 100 games in the space of 2 weeks or whatever it is. It's a bit different. So yeah, basically we're going to make some changes. The pod is going to stay as is. The pod is Arsenal Pass. It is what we're so passionate about doing and sharing this. And you notice now we're on video, as we say, so you can see our ugly mugs and Brennan's enrollment here. People are going to think that the Arsenal Pass channel is changing because you're off to the army. It's not true. Brendan has not enlisted, but we are making some changes. So in terms of our deck guides, we are still going to do these, especially on the decks that we play in events. I have Nationals coming up next weekend. We will be doing a video about that, and we will share the deck guide for that video and the sideboard plan and all that good stuff will still be there. But what we're saying is we're not going to commit to those at any given time. We're not going to say we're going to do those at X given time. Same with our gameplays. When we want to play gameplays or games and we want to share decks or matchups that we find really interesting, we will be doing that. We still want to do those. But, over Christmas, it was a bit of a lull time. We made some videos on Walker's Wraith, which was really fun and cool. But I think fun. Yeah, it's really fun. But there's less necessity to do that or to play Blitz games that maybe we aren't as passionate about. So gameplays will still be there. They just won't be each and every week. I think probably, if I had to guess, we're probably still going to be playing a couple of games each month, and especially around new formats and things like that, we'll be playing a lot more. I imagine when Everfest comes, we're going to be playing a lot of games. So, yeah,
100%. I mean, what Hayden, what you said there, kind of sums up all of the changes. Right? Is that we're going to be outside of the podcast. We will be moving towards doing content on demand, right? Kind of as we want to, as it's relevant, right? Like when there's a lull period, we may take some time off, kind of like the rest of the community does, rather than maintaining that kind of weekly schedule and maybe pumping out videos just for the sake of pumping them out, which is not what we were trying to do before, but maybe was kind of how it started to feel. So while there still will be a lot of content on YouTube, it just won't be scheduled kind of like it has been for the past few months.
Yeah, and I just kind of want to wrap this up. We want to talk about Patreon quickly as well, but it's been a bit of like a harder decision for me to make, I think, to just say that we want to stop being scheduled with things, because it does feel a little bit selfish for me in some ways, but also I actually think it's the best for the content that we make. We want to keep it as high quality as possible. And first and foremost, we love sharing, our thoughts and discussing and interacting with our community and our Arsenal Pass listeners and viewers. And that doesn't change. I think we just take away some of the stress of feeling like we have to do content for the sake of doing it. And we just don't want to be doing that. We think it's doing a disservice to our community as well. So that's kind of the big driving behind the change. We still want to give as much value as possible with every piece of content that we make, so that people can go away and take something from it. And that's not going to change. It's just going to be in a format that we feel is more conducive, and it allows us a bit more time to do things that we want to do, like the Twitter Spaces that we're doing on the weekend, on Friday. Sorry, on my weekend, Brendan's Friday, which allows us to bring someone like a Zach Barnon and have a conversation about a really pertinent topic, as opposed to maybe having scheduled a gameplay for that day that we don't necessarily think is important right now. So yeah, I'm looking forward to that. But Brendan, last thing I want to talk about is just some changes we're going to make to our Patreon online with this. Don't need to talk about it too much, but just for our patrons who might want to know, and for people who are looking at doing it for the Patreon, just so you know, we do have currently 4 tiers. We're going to do away with our top tier. This was always a supporter tier, to be honest. It's really, I think we had an additional video once a month. We're going to give that to I think most of our tiers. Now you can check out the Patreon to see the what's available, but basically we're just trying to give more for less and move away that tier. The deck guides are still going to be available there. Access to our Discord is there for all tiers. All tiers get access to our additional podcast each month. We're going to do that. We love that discussion that we do each month for our patrons as an additional pod. And the deck guides there. And then any additional resources we're actually just going to start throwing up as well, because Patreon is a bit of a platform we can use to kind of put stuff up that we can't put on YouTube, like written guides. I've done a draft sort of sheet for Nationals for Tales of Aria. That's going to go up in there. We've done one for Welcome to Wraith, because that format is awesome and the farewell events are really cool, and it's something that we wanted to do. So that's going to go up on there. So yeah, we're still going to use it as a platform for the things that we want to use it for. But we just restructured the tiers a little bit, because we just want to, I guess it just doesn't really fit with some of the content that we're making as much anymore. That makes sense.
Yeah. My parting word on this would be, we are making these choices not because, we don't think the demand is there. We don't think that, it performs well. Like, I think it does. And I'm very happy with how the channel progressed throughout 2021. And I think it went really well. It's purely being made as a personal choice just because of, time management, commitment, and just overall kind of what Hayden said. We are players first, and we want to make content that we're passionate about. And, we're not really interested in kind of having the formulaic, one video a week, one of this a week. So we'd rather just put out stuff that we really enjoy.
We haven't been clickbaity enough for that anyway, so...
Yeah, we really haven't. If I was going to double down on the YouTube stuff, I'd be hanging upside down with my shirt off, and it'd be the craziest news that you've ever heard every video, but it's not. We probably should migrate to that eventually, to be honest, because we're just playing against the algorithm.
Yeah,
but
that's not us. It's all right.
it's not you, but it might be me.
That's true.
Yeah, I think this is going to be much more sustainable. We're focusing, we're doubling down the stuff that we think we're really good at, that we enjoy doing, like the podcast, talking to people, whether that's time of the round, that's these Twitter Spaces, and doing unique content with the deck decks we really enjoy, matches that we like to play that are relevant in the current meta, as well as just content as it comes. Like Hayden is going to be throwing up these Welcome to Wraith draft guides, which is going to be awesome. So I think that for a lot of people, the YouTube won't look like it's changing, but we just want to make it really clear, because we know some people do follow us for some of the weekly videos,
regular drops,
and and particularly with some of the Patreon stuff. So we've restructured how it works over there as well.
Yeah, so that is happening from Feb, just to be clear for anyone who is there. And the big thing that, and I want to say thank you to everyone who's supported us and continues to support us. One of the big things that actually the Patreon has allowed us to do is we have an editor. So we have someone who edits our videos for us that allows us to have like those card overlays. And, when Brendan tanks for 10 minutes, we don't have to have those in the videos, and we can have a nice montage instead. And we have a community manager who's amazing, who helps us with some of the stuff and making sure that things get seen, that comments and questions get seen, and that we can spend time, interacting and doing the important stuff, to be honest, the stuff that we love to do. So yeah, that has continued to allow us to do that. So just want to say thank you to all of our supporters again, and just everyone who listens and watches the pod and our videos. Anyway, that's enough about that. Let's
yeah, I mean, we wrap it up with pretty much nothing is changing, right? You won't really notice anything. But just making it clear, in case. But Hayden, we've definitely rambled way too long. Let's go ahead and head in. Do we have a command to Cookout today?
We do have a command to Cookout. Yeah, we do.
Is all paprika on the grill? What is that? It's burning, Hayden. It's burning. You gotta take it off. What's on there?
It's mayonnaise, dude. Calm down. We've got a question that's come through our Discord. One of my favorite things about having our community Discord for our patrons now is this ability to just have like questions whenever we want people to drop stuff in. So we have a question from Toasty who says, my question is about the large number of heroes in the game and people being attached to specific ones. In Flesh and Blood, it's easy to have a favorite hero, and many people might not want to switch heroes in order to play something viable in a meta. Do you think it's possible to support everyone's main as time goes on, or should people maybe shift their expectations and try to dedicate themselves to something like a class as a whole instead of hoping for one hero to be strong enough? Really relevant right now with Everfest, I think.
A lot of questions in that question, too.
Well, the main question is, should people be attached to a single hero, or should they be more focused on classes so that they can have more ability to be competitive within a meta and maybe have more enjoyment maybe as well, because you're just...
100%.
Yeah.
Contextual based off what you're trying to achieve. I think that if you're trying to achieve anything less than competing at the absolute highest level, this game is so incredibly well designed and balanced that everything does feel competitive and reasonable to play at most levels, right? And that's what I really love about the game. Like, we joke about Azalea a lot, we joke about Kano a lot, but I mean, I love Kano. Kano is my favorite deck, by far, and I love to play it. And I play it at local events, at armories, or when we're testing, when we're going deep on testing and testing every day and it gets tired, we will take a break with a Kano game. So I think that you can absolutely have that one hero or that one class that you identify with and really specialize in it. There's another part of this question, which is, I think we've answered it before. Is like, is this what you should be doing? If you're trying to win a world championship, right? And maybe not. But other than that, I think that you can have tons of enjoyment, be very competitive, and I think you're going to ultimately have more fun overall if you're playing the classes you enjoy.
I think contextual is the right word. It depends. It so depends on what you want to get out of this game, and so you can take it a few different ways. You talked about like competitiveness. You talked about like maybe it's just showing up to your armory and being able to win some games in any given meta. Maybe it's just about fun, to be honest. And I would say that for all those reasons, I actually think having an identity with a class more than a hero it's a bit more beneficial, except for one thing, which is if you really identify with how a hero operates in terms of like either like the lore of that hero or the hero ability that hero holds, or the specific way that deck plays because of that hero, that's also fine. Like, that is more than okay. But I think it's understanding that as a player who's attached to that hero, you're going to have limitations. And you're going to have some pretty stringent limitations on what that hero can and cannot do for the remainder probably of the life of that hero. Because Toasty asked about, should there be support for all these people who want to main single heroes? I think to a degree, but there's wedges of design. There's design spaces that certain heroes can occupy and explore, and classes expand that a little bit. But if you're open to a couple of classes or a couple of heroes, you get to see a lot more of that design space and a play experience. And I think having a main hero can be great. I think it'd be really awesome, especially whether you want to be competitive, semi-competitive, like ultra-competitive, whatever it is. I think having one particular hero as a main can actually be really beneficial. But I think you then want to open yourself up to at least maybe one or two others. And probably, to be honest, I'd say even if you just want to play at home, I would do the same, because you're less focused on maybe needing legendaries and stuff like this. You can just build the decks you want, play Commoner or Pauper or whatever those formats are that are kind of equivalent, that are kind of coming up around this game, which is awesome to see. And just explore the other heroes, enjoy the design space that's there. And then when you're bored, like Brendan says, go back to Kano and play 100 more games.
Yep, 100%. I think that, to kind of go off Hayden's point there, I think that if you do limit yourself to one class, this is my personal opinion, I do think that you are missing out on some of the beautiful parts of Flesh and Blood, which is the kind of diversity in class design, and how unique things can feel. It's really fun to play everything, in my opinion.
Oh, play some things. I even had fun playing a lot of Azalea for a while, and then I was kind of done with that, and let's move to something else. And that's a big part of the game for me. And I know for some people it's not going to be. They're just going to be like identify with something in particular. It's like people who play like MOBAs, right? And they just play one hero, and that's fine, right? If you identify with a hero specifically and you want to hone your skill on that hero, then do it. But at some point you might want a different experience and play something else. Why not?
Yes, we gave you the classic yes/no answer.
Last thing I will say, because Toasty did ask about like design for those and should we service them to a degree. So if it's about the competitive space, I don't think there's an obligation from LSS to make sure that every hero can compete in every single meta. Definitely not. That wouldn't be fun in my eyes. So I think it'd be great if all heroes can at some point have something going for them. They can experience something at some point. But you know what? If Azalea never ends up being tier 1. Kind of is what it is, right? But there's another ranger there to slide into with Lexi, and you can, there's some similarities there in design space and experience of the game.
100%.
If you want to get a question of the Commander Cookout, you can. If you want to get a question of the Commander Cookout, you can drop a question in the YouTube comments. You can send it to us. You can add us on Twitter, DM us. Whatever way you want to get it to us, please do.
Morse code, whatever it is, we got it. We
tap on Brennan's window.
Yeah. You wouldn't be the first. So finally, into the main talk of the pod, the biggest news that I would argue the biggest news that has ever hit Flesh and Blood newsreels in terms of balance and effect on the game. This is massive. We've seen so many not so many bans. We've seen more bans than I expected in the past, and they've had an impact. They've been more narrow in their selection. But this new wave, Hayden, this is a different Flesh and Blood. We've got a big ban wave here. We're hitting generics. We're hitting class cards. We're errata-ing. Give me your thoughts.
Well, yeah, I mean, usually this is weird because usually the main topic is kind of my space to introduce and take us through. But Brennan, this is your time to shine.
Flipping on them.
Let's start with the errata. I think is an easy place to start because it's something that's we've seen bannings before. We saw Drone and Brutality ban. We saw Seeds banned. But this is pretty unprecedented, right? Like this is an errata, and we talked heavily about the idea of an errata in our community sort of hot seat pod, and I think in our maybe the pod afterwards as well. We talked again about Briar because we had a question on Rune Blades for the Commander Cookout. So first of all, the errata now says that Briar, just the first time that an attack action deals damage, will you get an embodiment of Earth? After that, no more embodiments of Earth. So the reasoning from LSS was that the idea was to allow, some flexibility of your 2 defense non-attack actions to be more playable because they could defend for 3. But, when they're defending for 4, 5, 6, 7, maybe not quite the intent of design or the realization of how that has ended up working out wasn't quite in line with how LSS thought it might be. So the justification I get.
Yes.
My first thought on the errata is it's still bad for the game.
Erratas suck, period. And I love LSS and I love my boy Sasha, but erratas are bad for the game. They're not good. They're really inconvenient. They're very confusing to new players. They're even confusing to not new players. It's one of the most drastic things that you can do, in my opinion. So this is about as they must have thought the situation was quite dire, right? Like they must have thought that this class or this hero never would have been reeled in by any one card or couple card bannings. So it's significant. I want to also expand upon the embodiment of Earth aspect, especially for the opponent. It was not fun to be the opponent because it was bad if you blocked because you would never be able to hit them back, right? If you blocked the whole entire hand, stop the embodiments. But then if you didn't block and you tried to swing back and pivot turn, they now had a non-attack action that could block for like 5 or 6. So it was very anti-pivot turn, and I know a lot of people didn't enjoy that. That being said, back to the errata, yeah, it's not good, but I do err on the side of optimism, and I'm willing to say that if they think it was necessary, I'm okay with it. Although I hope this is not a precedent that is, lightly used in the future.
Yeah. Yeah, I want to just explain when I say I think this is really bad for the game. What I mean is I don't think that the changes to Briar is bad for the game. I think we needed something to probably happen, especially if Everfest wasn't going to be the balance that maybe it could have been or might have people hoped would be. Then I think we definitely needed that. My problem with an errata is the actual use of errata in cards. I think it's, like Brendan said, it's really confusing for players coming into the game. Okay, I open up my pack. Cool, there's this hero. I'm playing with some friends. I'm learning the game, and then I go along to my first armory, and I've built my Briar deck, and then I chip in all this damage with my lightning cards that deal extra arcane damage. I'm playing Arcana Crackles, and I've built this cool deck, and then my opponent goes, "Oh no, you only get one embodiment." My token doesn't say what. No, there's a change. You have to look online to see it, but you only get the first token. And I granted that's not going to happen. That's not a wide thing that might happen, but it's a real feel bad. And there's a lot of people who are going to be opening this product. Also impacts limited. Let's not forget. So people going along to draft, playing this hero, and then this is not actually how it works. And it's just it's a bit of a feels bad, I think, and it's also a bit of like you've got to manage this within the game. So while I think that it's not great, I don't think we should be errata-ing cards ideally. If this is the only way to balance Briar going forward, then I guess it needed to be done, and I can support that. The issue I have is I think it does undermine a little bit the Living Legend system.
Yeah, it's kind of weird, eh? Like she was progressing towards being Living Legend, and this has like happened twice now, where like the hero was obviously probably going to be Living Legend. Sorry, it's a weird thing to say. In a amount of time that you could predict, right? Like it looked pretty clear, and then they just went in and were like, I mean, with Chain, obviously they banned Seeds, and now they banned Plunder, which we'll get into. But with this, it was just like I don't know. It's kind of weird. It's a little bit contradictory, right? Like we have this Living Legend system. It's really clear. It keeps things in check, so they can't maintain dominance. But then we just go ahead and errata it anyway after it's accumulated all these points. Like maybe they just thought that the limited, limited would have always been plagued by this issue, but we saw Briar being dominant in Seal, but then in draft, like was debatably one of the weakest decks in Tales of Warrior draft. So it's kind of weird. But yeah, there has been multiple decisions with the Living Legend system that have confused me from a player's perspective. Like I'm okay with us using that system to keep the game in check. I think that it's relatively healthy. The game might suffer for a little bit, but ultimately checks and balances, everything corrects. And now we're getting kind of this, big brother hand where they just come in and they just change it right in the middle, right? And maybe it's necessary. Maybe it's important for fun, but as a player, it's jarring, right? Because you don't expect something like a hero text errata when there's, an inherent system that's going to rotate them out of the format anyway.
Yeah, it's like we have a point in the future, and we're heading towards this point, which is a Living Legend rotation out, and then all of a sudden, the path gets changed, and I get it. Like if the idea is that they really needed Briar to function, and both for limited and constructed, it just doesn't function right now, then that's fine. But yeah, the idea of an errata, so the Seeds ban, kind of whatever, because you're not changing the hero. Chain is chain. Chain is still chain. And if cards get printed that, enable chain to be better in the future, fantastic. But you're actually functionally changing the hero with Briar. I will say the one thing that is good about this errata is that it doesn't change it too much. So in terms of throttles the power, but the feel of the hero is still very much the same, which is good. But I hope this is kind of a one-time thing. I hope this is like LSS learning the lesson early, and then we move forward with the game, and we don't need to errata heroes in the future. Living Legend set us start to realize and to happen, because we've got this idea of Living Legend. I think it's really cool. When do we actually get to see that happen without all the interventions?
Yeah. So if I was going to put on my YouTube hat, right, and I was going to do some kind of clickbaity little one-liner, it'd be like, just pick, right? It's either Living Legend or it's you're constantly changing and banning and errata-ing cards. Like there's either a system that's been developed to keep things in check, and you only intervene if it's really bad, right? Or this kind of thing that's happened is going to be normal and consistent, not the errata, but the bannings, right? Like constant oversight from the governing company to change the meta, make it more healthy, whatever they think, right? But then Living Legends is kind of weird in that point. But Living Legend fundamentally, like, I'm not going to go too deep on this spiel. Living Legend fundamentally has just been kind of weird, right? They've changed it multiple times over the past year. I still think that, we're in a weird place with it. I don't even know if we're in the final iteration. But yeah,
so.
I mean, fun. But our final take, and this is going to be ubiquitous between Hayden and I, and probably a lot of players, especially people that come from card games. Errata, last case, and like just worst case scenario, last thing you do, you Errata. So we're okay with it. We err on the side of optimism and believing in the development team of Flesh and Blood. But I hope that this is going to be as close to a one-time thing as possible.
Yeah. I feel like I shouldn't have to say this, but because there's this real divide in the community of like people on sides of fences, which I don't really get, to be honest.
Tribal human beings. Yeah, never.
It's just like, and I'm just going to say something because I think I just want to make it clear. Both Brendan and I want the healthiest iteration of the game possible, and some of the decisions we might not agree with in isolation, but if they're to help the longevity of the game and the health of the game and the formats, fantastic. I really did want to see. I don't want Briar to be the best deck. I don't want there to be these heroes that are oppressive. I never want that to happen. I do want there to be heroes that are accessible, easy to play, and to, I guess, have certain ways of playing. And that's fine. But I think just want to point out, in no way, shape, or form are we like dedicated Runeblade players who only want Runeblade to be good. I mean, that's just not true. And I probably don't need to say that for the majority of people, but I do just want to point that.
Yeah, I wonder if it'd be funny if people think about us that way. Because
people have told me that. People have told me that.
Yeah,
so that's
for
why
sure. I mean, it's just the design of Flesh and Blood has made it's like a recency bias to the past metas of Flesh and Blood, which have been Runeblade dominated, which is not on us. It's on them. We just play decks that we think have the highest chances of winning in competitive events. But, to kind of close the book on the Errata, again, I think both of us err way on the side of just believing in anything they do and we're okay with it. But, if we're taking an objective point of view and if we were going to try to critique it a bit, yeah, Errata shouldn't be happening. Let's not do it again. For the many reasons that we talked about. And, well, functionally, it might be a better version of Briar that's just more fun for everybody, except the people that are donking on people with Briar. I think that it's a dangerous tool. So it's done. I'm okay with it. I'm excited for the future, and I think that we can. I feel like we're breaking up in a relationship. We can move on, have a healthy relationship, healthy Flesh and Blood. No, but I actually think we can. But yeah, I mean, it is what it is. We have an Errata.
So before, because I really want to ask you like what you think this Errata has on the impact of, because it's not Errata in isolation, you would say, is not detrimental to Briar being strong, being a good hero. But we've got some banning. So I want to talk about the bannings first and our thoughts on cards being banned and these cards that have been banned. And then I want to talk about, just in terms of these cards being banned just for the game in total. And then I want to come back and talk about the classic constructed format and what this means for Briar and as we head into Everfest. So 2 cards banned, right? We've got All Lightning is banned. All cycles of All Lightning is banned. And all cycles of Plunder Run are banned. And this is effective from January 17th, but it excludes the New Zealand Australian National Championship. So all the testing that people have done will be intact for that. But after that, yeah, everyone is on the same wave. And it's happening before Everfest, which is really interesting. But I think that's to give people understanding of what's happening with these things. First of all Lightning being banned. What's your thoughts?
Can I punt this question and zoom us out a bit because I want to get us some context on these bans. So these set of bannings, and this is outside of the Errata, are, in my opinion, unprecedented in Flesh and Blood history. So if we go through what cards have been banned. What?
Sorry, it's a pretty short history. But
yeah, it's pretty short history. So if we go through what cards have been banned in Flesh and Blood, they've all been banned for very specific reasons, right? We have Drone of Brutality, breaks the fundamental rules of the game. It doesn't matter. Like, literally nothing you do matters. Drone is always there. It's inevitable. And no other card functions like that. Okay, so that gets banned it's pretty reasonable. We all kind of expect that one to get banned. Then we move forward and we have Seeds of Agony gets banned. Chain was fundamentally very, very consistent and very strong, and one of the cards that really allowed it to do that. We talked about it a million times in the podcast why Seeds of Agony was so good, building Ursa, end games, non-attack action, swing Nebula Blade. These things were fundamentally so powerful, and Chain was reeled in quite a bit, at least in its consistency. By that banning, and I think we potentially saw a healthier format. Dustblade, Legendary Studios comes out, they admit that they did not test this card, and it is fundamentally overpowered and does not belong in what we can see now as the game, but at the time, the classic constructed format. So, okay, fair enough, everyone takes an L, that's all good. Now we come to today. Ball Lightning and Plunder Run. Plunder Run, a generic card that is used by aggressive decks by most aggressive decks, right? It's a very common card. It's a fundamental card to the aggressive archetype.
Go wide aggressive cards.
Even the mid range, right? It's so fundamental. And obviously, its biggest offender right now is Briar, but we see a ban on that. I mean, the ramifications of the Plunder Run ban go definitely far outside Briar, but also Ball Lightning. Ball Lightning as well. Is Ball Lightning really equivalent to the power level of something like Seeds of Agony? Is what Briar does to another player during the game, is it really predicated off the amount of Ball Lightnings that they play during a game or that they draw during a game? I would argue maybe not. It doesn't really feel like Seeds. Like, it feels quite a bit different. Like, Ball Lightning was a very good card in Briar, right? And it was good in combination with other things as well. Like, multiple Ball Lightnings was very good. Ball Lightning with Sting was very good. And just, of course, forcing your opponent to block when they don't want to block. And Ball Lightning can make that sort of equation tip in your favor when they're like, oh, it's just coming in for 3 or 4 or 5 or whatever multiplicative damage it's doing. This banning on Ball Lightning, Hayden, this one surprises me the most. I think we talked about the Plunder Run ban being a potential for the game's health, but the Ball Lightning didn't see it coming. I actually, because we've talked about it before, like there was an end game sequence that was really consistent against control. At least initially, that's what I thought. I was a huge proponent of it, especially against Oldtime, which was the sting, blah, 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 whatever. But it's actually not very good against Oldhim, and it's only good against like niche control decks, kind of like stuff, Control Bravo, right? Which doesn't really exist so I don't think that the Ball Lightning ban really surprises me, Hayden. What are your thoughts on it?
Yeah,
your take.
So I just want to give the reasoning behind this from LSS is the decision is around reducing consistency of the Briar deck in support of opening the door to other aggressive decks to re-enter the metagame, which I think that's something that really needs to happen. That's something we've talked about.
Yeah. Good statement, yes.
Yeah. It currently gives Briar decks the critical mass of lightning cards with fuse effects. That feels like it should. It feels like we should be able to fuse cards in constructed. Attack action cards that Weave Lightning can buff, and perhaps most importantly, attack actions with unconditional go again. So I think that's where it comes down to for me, is the unconditional go again and a static effect that applies across a chain. If you draw a line between Plunder Run and Ball Lightning, it's the static effect that goes across the turn or combat chain, and that's really important. I think that's the one design aspect that I think is maybe potentially being played a little bit too loose and fast. And I think that's probably the issue that we've gotten into here, is you have an effect that carries across and stacks with multiple of these, and that combined with the ability for these to be quite flexible cards. You've got unconditional go again. Yeah, it doesn't defend, but they pitch, they attack, they sit in aggressive decks anyway. Plunder Run, played from Arsenal, can be pitched, still defends for 2, replaces itself. Like, these all these things add up to just too much on one single card, I think, and that's kind of where Ball Lightning sits. And there's another piece around Ball Lightning that I think we're going to dive into probably later down the track, maybe on a time around the future. But there's 4 or 5 cards in this game that I think are fundamentally potentially broken. Plunder Run was one of those, and I've talked about it before, my issues with Plunder Run for just the health of the game, and I'm actually glad that Plunder Run's been banned, personally. I think it was probably the right decision, the right time for it to happen. It felt like it was always going to happen. There's 3 or 4 other cards that I think are potential issues for the future of the game, and Ball Lightning can exploit some of those, so maybe it buys some time for some of those other cards.
The main thing I didn't like about Ball Lightning is I thought that it was a bit clunky.
Reasoning or
huh?
The card or the reasoning?
No, the card itself, right?
Okay.
The card. I felt like the card was a bit clunky. And I don't know. It was kind of weird, especially when we got some of those rulings. There was like, I remember, I mean, even in the Orlando calling alone, like I had multiple different rulings on ball lightning, which is funny. But I somewhat disagree with you, Hayden. So I hear about all those really good things you talk about ball lightning doing, but then at the same time, it doesn't block, right?
Mhm.
Like I felt like that was enough of a downside for it to be able to do that. There is the persistent effect across the combat chain, which yes, those sort of the cards with those designs have been offenders, right? We see both Plunder Run and ball lightning now. I still am not 100% sure. I like think that this was the cornerstone of what made Briar unfun, unfair, and too good. And
No,
obviously also Lexi.
I don't think it is. I don't think it is, but it's in support of the. So basically, I wouldn't be surprised to see Ball Lightning become unbanned. I think of all the cards we've seen banned so far, Ball Lightning is the one that has the least fundamental issues and could be unbanned because of the, like you say, it doesn't defend, so it has this downside to it inherent. But right now in this meta, and I think what they're trying to do they want to swing the meta. They want to make sure that Briar gets hit, that people can play other aggressive decks, and so that's where Ball Lightning comes in. I think that's where this gets hit. I wouldn't be surprised to see it unbanned. The way that this interacts with that deck to allow consistency of the go wide turns, the pushing of damage, the fusing, and then also with a card like Mount Heroic, which you can't go past. I think is the reason that we see Ball Lightning banned now. But I wouldn't be shocked if 12 months down the track, 18 months down the track, Ball Lightning becomes unbanned as the meta sort of changes and card pool grows.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So I think kind of in conclusion, the ball lightning ban is surprising for me.
I
And
definitely was
totally agree.
surprised. Yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree with everything you say. I mean, I think that this is like disproportionately punishing to Lexi, which is unfortunate, lightning Lexi, but it's probably so I was kind of going to wait for this for the end, but the reason why I am so okay and I guess happy about these bans is like, as a player, I just think it'll be really fun because
Yeah.
this is going to shake up the game a lot.
Too.
Did these cards actually need to get banned? That's a harder thing for me to kind of reconcile with. I would say Plunder Run, while it was such an offender and it was so popular and it was such a slot in, even at a 9 of in so many decks, I still don't know if it was like fundamentally needed to get banned, but let's go ahead and talk about that. Let's move on to Plunder Run, Hayden. So what Plunder Run allowed a lot of decks to do is Plunder Run allowed classes without inherent hit triggers to have one of the most significant hit triggers in the games, which is draw a card. Flesh and Blood, or not Flesh and Blood, Legend Story talked about this in their article, is that it often put the opposing player in a situation where they felt like they had to block with their entire hand and just see what happens, right? It was a consistent offender in Chain, one of the most pivotal cards in that deck, and then obviously in Briar as well, and many other aggressive decks. I mean, Katsu is going to feel the banning of this as well. I mean, the ramifications go for pretty all of these bannings, right? They go much farther than just
Right.
Briar. What we think about when we see these bans. So Plunder Run did have some downsides though. It did require setup, right? Plunder Run in sort of by itself, wasn't nearly as good as when you were able to set it up in Arsenal and kind of get that big turn with it at the same time. Its combination with something like Spellbound Creepers was a bit interesting, right? Like we did see a very powerful interaction there. And like I said, it was often played as a 9 of, where the sort of bonus damage effect was, it was good, right? It was important, but it wasn't nearly as important as being able to draw the card. But again, like, I don't know. It's a tough question, right? Because you did really like the bonus damage. It's just, I'm just trying to reconcile myself into understanding kind of why this was banned. I would say in my final point here is that Plunder Run has, in a recency bias way, it was a massive offender in both Monarch and Tales of Aria, and probably should have been a more prevalent card in the Crucible of War format.
I mean, yeah. So I think that Plunder Run is just fundamentally not a good card for the game. You talked about it needs to be set up and things like that. Yeah, it does, but it's also a cycle. So, you've got blues that pitch, you've got reds that you can play for power. But effectively, if you're playing a red from your arsenal, you're playing a nimblism that replaces itself. Because when you're playing these, you're changing the way that games are played. And Alice's talk about this in sort of the reasoning for banning is that often it becomes, I dump my hand to defend and hope that the on-hit trigger doesn't get pushed through. And that's what the Plunder Run effectively is. It's this nimblism that replaces itself. And in decks that care about non-attack actions, you're just getting another point. So you have a card that's a cycle, you have a card that defends for 2, you have a card that replaces itself, and you have a card that it puts on power and changes breakpoints. That's so many things that you're ticking. And then also in Rune Blades, you add on something that affects, other, has, I guess, additive bonuses with it being a non-attack action. So for Briar, that's half an embodiment. For Viscerai, that's making, half or setting up a rune chant. For Chain, that turns on Rosetta Thorn, or for all these decks turns on Rosetta Thorn. It's just too many things. And the fact that that ability goes over the turn, I think, is if Plunder Run said, the next attack action you play this turn gets +3, and if it hits draw a card, I think Plunder Run is a fine card and would be fine. Or if this card was Majestic at yellow cycle, would have been fine as well. I think the fact that this is, sorry, not a cycle at yellow, the fact that this is a cycle across, ability to play 9 copies in Classic Constructed is huge. The ability to replicate this effect over so many turns, the consistency of this is an issue. And yeah, look, the biggest issue right now has been Briar and Chain, and people will say, oh, I play Katsu, and this is a big hit to my Katsu deck. Completely understand that and get that. The long term, I think, of this card being in the game was just going to get worse and worse, to be honest. I think when this card was printed in Arcane Rising, this card, I had issue with this card. I felt that maybe it wasn't supported at the time. I felt in Crucible it was pretty supported. I think in Katsu decks, people should have been playing 6 copies, and the card was very good. But as we go through and we get more, abilities to go wider or to play different game plans, Spellbound Creepers, things like this, it's just too much on that card. It has too many boxes being ticked.
It would have been, you could have reasonably inferred that it would have been a cornerstone in every aggressive deck. Now and in the future that uses attack action cards. I think that this card was actually like a major reasoning behind the ban of this card was for fun. I think that there was a massive fun consideration. Be on the end of a Plunder Run is not fun. Your opponent gets their Plunder Run before you. They put in Arsenal. You now have to dump your hand. You still get hit. They draw another card. Maybe they have another Plunder Run.
And do it again.
Exactly. It's not fun.
It's a cycle.
It's not fun.
It's a cycle. You play none of them.
That blows.
it creates stale game states. It creates these really clear and obvious game states that, one, aren't fun, but also isn't really in the design of, I guess, how Fish and Blood is often played. And I think that's really clear from the developers and the designers that they don't want that to be a big cornerstone of a format of these decks that just do. So 9, you're playing in about what? That's 18-19% of your deck is Plunder Runs, or can be, Classic Constructed. That's a lot. You can replicate this effect so many times. And yeah, yellows and blues have less impact, but when you have combat tricks, when you have instant and attack reactions, then you're just adding things on, and we're going to get more of that as the game goes. So it wasn't going to change. It wasn't like we were going to see Plunder Run become less prevalent in aggressive go-wide decks. That wasn't going to happen. We were just going to see more things that could push it. So because the effect itself is so strong, it replaces itself. So yeah, we talked about it in that community hot seat episode we did, I think, around episode 30, and I felt it was the card. If it was a card to be banned, it was the card to be banned.
It was the card, right? It was key. It kept being an issue, right? It kept
not just for Briar.
No, not just for Briar. Chain. Okay, Art of War was tilting in Chain. That was a really swingy card, and if you got it early, it was really important. You got to, you were highly favorable to now win the game. But Plunder Run was a major cornerstone of that deck. Even the version of that deck that was more set up and more controlling and more combo. Plunder Run was still an absolute foundation. I want to talk about Hayden. So let's just take the listeners away from opinions, right? Or just pretend like we all are okay with it, right?
Okay.
What's good about this? What does this mean for the future, and why is it exciting? Because that's what I said. Is I may not agree with their bans and their reasoning and thinking that it's congruent with the past bannings and the reason why those cards have been banned. But as a player, I'm still excited because this does change the game significantly.
Yeah. So yeah, I think the kind of, just to wrap it up, I guess we probably disagree on the Plunder Run ban. I think we both are a bit kind of, I think you disagree with the Ball Lightning ban. I'm unsure. I don't really get the reasoning. I think is to stem further issues for certain things, which is may or may not be the right reason. But I think we can both agree that what this is going to do to the format and do to the game is actually really exciting. So we're going to see aggressive decks that have really struggled to be playable in the last two metagames be playable. I think we're going to see mid-range decks that just could not function a game plan when you had something like Plunder Run, pushing effects turn after turn that allowed you to not play the game. And, one or two turns where I have to like adapt my game. But when I have to adapt, every second turn, some of these decks just weren't playable. As a Rhinar player, I can, I'll get around that. So I think what we're going to see is a positive change to a format where we've gone from two formats in a row, been really aggressive formats, and funnily enough, this format's been even more aggressive, to potential for more setup-based decks, more decks that interact with those setup-based decks because mid-range decks can be more playable, different aggressive heroes being able to play, and in interesting ways. Katsu is like a really interesting hero, right? Like the combo aspect, the Katsu ability aspect, that's really interesting, and that's the same with Lightning Elixir decks. I think are really interesting in that regard as well. And there's these different things, but just they haven't been able to see play or to be explored because as soon as you go, oh, this, okay, well, I can't be Briar, I'm just going to leave this for now in Classic Constructed, and that's not fun. So
this
I think
is huge for mid range, right? Like this is
in theory.
Mid range has been struggling for a while. Yeah, in theory, of course, right? To my point, mid range has been struggling. You've kind of had to be on the extreme side where you're either ultra aggressive or sometimes it feels ultra defensive. There's been some exceptions to that, of course. But I think we might see a little bit more of a middle ground now, which is nice. I'm excited for that. To be honest, kind of being on the very polar opposite sides of aggression and defense it got a little bit boring sometimes. And some of the decks that I found to be more intellectually stimulating weren't very viable, right? So it could be the Rhinar. It could be, it could
Livia,
be
Kano,
exactly all the decks that kind of really haven't seen play, and it looks a bit innocuous, just a Plunder Run ban, but I think that it paves the way for a lot of these mid-range decks to have their time in the format.
So cautious because we talked about this with
with
Tales of Aria, but I think the things we discussed with Tales of Aria, we still didn't, I guess, address some of the issues with aggressive decks and Runeblades in particular.
Thought that they were gonna. I feel like they thought that things were gonna change with Tales of Aria. To be fair, I think that LSS thought that Tales of Aria was gonna have more of an impact than it did, in a different way than it did. Right, we ended up just getting kind of a different flavor. Of
it had impact.
With Briar. Yeah, it had an impact. We just got a different flavor of Chain, and obviously Chain was still around as well. I think that that ice mechanic didn't do nearly as much as we thought it would, and probably LSS thought it would. To be completely fair, but I'm equally as hesitant as you, but also optimistically excited.
So the ice impact is true. Old Time has an impact on the format in terms of how it plays into aggressive decks. The problem is that no other aggressive decks are viable other than this particular way of playing an aggressive deck because of all the boxes it ticks in terms of the things that it can do. So you know what? It could turn around that Plunder Run. It isn't enough. I don't know. Something in Everfest. I think we're going to be really careful about what happens with Everfest. But my optimism is that I had talked about my issues with Plunder Run. That's a card now that's gone. There's a few other cards that I'm a little bit worried about. And we'll see what happens with the design space around them. At the moment, I think they're probably sustainable. But Everfest could produce one or two cards that push that over the edge. Yeah, kind of overall, I'm just excited I want formats to change. I was happy when Chain felt like it really started to pull back. Cool. More design space to explore, more things to work on for decks and things to explore. This pulling back, cool. More things to look at into my design space opens up. I want to play these interesting decks. I want to play these different things. And I want the things that feel restrictive to that to maybe necessarily be... I don't want it to not be there, but I want it to be a little bit less restrictive. I want the format to maybe have a bit more of a natural balance and just a format that's like Old Time and Briar, for instance. That's not a natural balance. Where does the other heroes play in? So, yeah, I think as long as we don't go the other way, as long as we don't swing the pendulum too far, I think it's great.
Yeah, I think regardless of pretty much everything, it's probably going to feel fresh, right? With both Everfest and the banning of these, more of this one critical card that has remained persistent throughout sets. The format should feel very fresh in Everfest, and I think we're we're gonna have a good time. But quickly, Hayden, we've been going long. We're gonna quickly. I say quickly a lot.
Yeah, we're about
touch
an hour.
We're gonna touch on Dustblade.
Yeah, we got to.
So
we got to.
Dustblade has now been banned in Blitz. So the TLDR on this is Dustblade sucks. But Hayden, why don't you tell us why?
I mean, so in the community hot seat episode, I talked about Plunder Run. We talked about it. If it was a card to be hit, it was Plunder Run and Class Constructed. Cool. Blitz, Dustblade is banned. Good. I mean,
Good.
like, if you played any Blitz this season and you tried to play a deck that wanted to take a game to the sort of mid to late game against Runeblades, I mean, you just couldn't, especially if they had the pressure. So Chain and Briar just felt abysmal to play against with Dustblade. So yeah, I think it's good. It's a good ban. I think it opens up design space for the Guardians. I think it opens up design space for some decks that want to play a second cycle of the deck, which is, kind of rare in Blitz, but maybe less rare now, because it'll just open up the format a little bit. So yeah, I mean, good. That's all I really have to say about it. I'm interested to see the next skirmish season and what we get out of it.
Yep, 100%. I mean, I didn't play too much Blitz with Dustblade, but I heard the complaints of my brethren. So, all right, Hayden. So, summing up kind of all of all the bands and all the erratas, ultimately, we feel positive, right? We're excited. We feel positive. I think that Flesh and Blood is going in an incredible direction, which it usually is. And it's going to take a lot for me to not have that opinion, but like there's a lot of room to explore. So, it should be fun. And Everfest, and I told you I opened that pack. Woo, it looks good. It looks good.
So I want to do one last thing, which is I want to give LSS a grade on this ban and restricted announcement. I think it's something we're going to do moving forward.
I'm never going to get another pack to open again, bro, in spoiler season.
So all things considered, we have our reservations. We have some things that we agree on and we think is going to be good for the health of the game. And I think overall we're glad to see change, right? If you were to give LSS a grade on what they've done here, all things considered, the bans they've done, the reasonings they've given, what's sort of like, they're talking about watch list wise and the decision to pull forward the ban restricted. What grade are you going to give LSS for this?
So I'm giving them a grade on this ban, right? This
Yeah.
Okay. It's tough. Okay, I'm going to take away my positive or negative feelings about it. I'm going to give them like a 4 because it's not congruent. It doesn't make any sense.
4 out of 10.
Yeah, 4 out of 10 because of Living Legend system doesn't make any sense to Errata in my opinion, or if it does, it just kind of came out of nowhere. We got to pick one, right? Are we having this sort of checks and balances system that runs itself out, and the players and the meta determines what how the game balances, what gets rotated out. Or do we have Big Brother come in and just swipe down, change the text on cards and ban cards and, drastically change the format? I think you should pick one, right? In regards to the most recent bans, again, these are not my opinions because I've told you I'm excited and I'm happy about it. Ultimately, I think that its congruency is heavily off, right? Like they don't really make a lot of sense. Like Plunder Run, yeah, I can get behind that one. Ball Lightning, to me, maybe I'm just not intelligent enough, right? Like I don't see it, right? Like, it doesn't make sense in context of what else has been banned. And then Dustblade probably should have never been legal in Blitz, but it's okay. Thanks for letting us play with it. Hayden, what about you?
So I think first of all, I was going to give like a ABC grade. So we're already apart on that. So let's just do it. We'll just do it our own way because why not? We didn't talk about this beforehand. I'm just kind of throwing this at Brendan, but yeah, look, I think overall. I talked about each of the cards individually. I do want to quickly just say about Ball Lightning. I think I get the angle of approach they're coming from. Whether I'm not actually sure if I completely agree with it or disagree with it, but I can get the approach. Is it the correct approach and reasoning? Don't know. If I was to give them a grade overall, I think I'd probably give them a B-. I think
what's your letter set? How far are we go? Is that between A and Z?
A, B, C, D, E, F, just the classic school grading system. So they get a pass grade from me. They're above a pass grade for me on this. I think the errata I have issues with fundamentally for the game, but I don't actually think the errata itself is bad. Right, we'll talk about that. Plunder Run, I agree with. That's the one I makes most sense to me. It's the one I expected or wanted to see, I guess, to a degree. Ball Lightning, Duskblade, yes. The fact that we've had to make these bannings, that's kind of here or there. It has happened now. It is what it is. I hope that that's a learning process and it's moved forward from a move forward position, as we talked about with seeds. And it's, the good thing, I guess, is it's not the same mistake twice, I guess, to a degree. The, I guess, decision to bring this forward, I think, is an interesting one. But I think it's to allow people the time, once spoiler season starts, to say, okay, actually, this doesn't interact with us like we thought it might, or, just a bit less feels bad if people start to invest in things, buy things up that they want to play with and then can't play with because maybe the deck doesn't function how they want it to. So, yeah, overall, I'm going to give them a B- on this one. Interested to see what happens next, and I'm glad we're going to see change, regardless.
I love how I lowball the grade, and you're like, yeah, it's all pretty now. I'm kidding. So, we hope you enjoyed this episode. Next week, we will likely be moving forward with what we plan to do this week, which is a get to know your host of Hayden Dale. So I'm going to do kind of a deep dive on Hayden Dale, going a lot deeper than just the player, right? Understanding the person, everything that's behind that beautiful voice that comes and joins us on this weekly podcast. But I want to no longer plug our YouTube channel. So we do have tons of content on the Arsenal Pass YouTube channel that is gameplay, deck techs, deck guides. I mean, deck techs and deck guides are the same thing. But I was thinking about the Welcome to Wraith draft guides that Hayden is doing. Go check those out. They're coming up. As well as, of course, the Twitter Spaces on Friday. It's going to be awesome, guys. I think it's really going to change the space in Flesh and Blood because it's collaborative, right? We can all kind of hang out, talk together. It's really, really cool. It's a great, great function. And finally, speaking of Twitter, Hayden is located at Fendale on Twitter, FYEN_Dale, and I'm located at Brendan APG. With that, thank you all so much for listening, and we will see you in the next episode. Oh my goodness, he has something to say.
I'm going to interrupt you. Can you look at the camera? Because we're first time videoing here, just as we close out this. Look at the camera, just directly into the camera. I just saw a comment on YouTube that said you look like Sid on Toy Story. See you next week.
Really?